In the depths of my despair, a twist of fate introduced me to the enigmatic丨a man as cold as ice yet harboring a secret warmth. 7 library emotions like excitement or pleasure had long been strangers to me. For an eternity, I had been trapped in a dark moment, unable to envision any future. But liberation arrived unexpectedly in the form of online school. A newfound excitement bubbled within me as I prepared to embark on this academic journey. I found myself meticulously selecting outfits and applying makeup, even though my classes were virtual. A genuine smile graced my lips while I had created for myself. By myself. From day one. The challenge was intense, to say the least. I embraced it wholeheartedly, my passion for learning ignited. As I immersed myself in my studies, I pondered why I had delayed enrollment for so long. Thoughts of my father surfaced, and I wondered why he hadn't encouraged me to pursue education earlier. Though my mother embodied the classic housewife, I wanted to believe my father desired more for his daughters. Blaze, my brother, certainly did. Blaze Quintienne, like an ice prince, had erected frozen barriers around himself to ward off the world. Yet, unlike my paralysis when faced with rejection, he wasn't completely frozen. We both shared the habit of concealing our true feelings. Blaze was like a circus performer, balancing precariously on a high wire to please the crowd below. He had perfected this act, all while longing to let go and crash to the ground, ending the performance a desire familiar to all who feel rejected. However, an invisible safety net prevented Blaze from hitting rock bottom. Someone known for kept him afloat while his world threatened to sink. This mysterious strength drove him to seek my help, believing I could guide him out of the darkness by sharing my own experiences. Blaze welcomed the assistance, appearing each evening ready to listen. Though hesitant to reveal his past, his wounds were still raw, but a natural determination to overcome his mate's actions shone through. As I opened up to Blaze, I felt the metaphorical birds of my own pain slowly taking flight. With each passing day, Blaze arrived at my quarters earlier and earlier. His enthusiasm for moving forward matched and even stimulated my own. Conversing with him felt effortless, though it became increasingly challenging not to desire more from our relationship. For my birthday, Blaze gifted me a personal library within my quarters. Reaching to the ceiling, was stocked with meticulously organized reading material. Unexpectedly, I fell in love with the scent of new pages. I dread that smell could trigger memories, and this aroma became synonymous with the serenity I felt. Each book I opened brought a whiff of ecstasy. Blaze often caught me inhaling the pages, causing my cheeks to flush not from embarrassment, but from the joy of unabashedly loving that smell. He began adding a new book daily, knowing I would introduce it to my nose first. Blaze discovered the contagious nature of happiness, which led to him spoiling me with an endless supply of new books. A door in my living room area connected to Blaze's study. Some mornings, he would knock until I answered, greeting me with a breakfast tray and warm eyes. Thus began our breakfast routine, and I found myself falling for him. As the months went by, some days I found Blaze didn't indulge in conversations of my past. Those days, he wanted to hear about what I'd planned after passing the bar. He encouraged me to have future plans. But you will stay here? He asked when I told him I wanted to work in the public prosecutor's office. You mean in this pack? His blue eyes were always a distraction to me. I loved them, but hated how they sent me into a state of mindless girlishness. Did you plan on leaving? I honestly don't think that far ahead. Do you not like it here? I had to think for a minute. Without leaving the confidentess of my living quarters, an honest answer was impossible. I've never been outside, I confessed. There was no point of leaving when everything I needed came to me. My groceries were delivered to my private quarters. My classes were online, and there was now a beautiful library all in the privacy of my living space. I had no reason to go beyond the front door access of my living quarters. Nothing from the outsides ever held enough encouragement. You've what? He asked with wide eyes. How lame did I sound? The girl who hides from the outside. Even on your birthday. You didn't go out shopping. Most women love shopping. No, not me. Get your coat. He called me to the door. We have to change that. Right now. There wasn't any room for arguments. Blaze had me out the door and, in his car, driving around the neighborhood. He stayed in character, acting as my personal tour guide. Every street and each place of business was identified with a brief history. In some cases where I assumed there was no history, he made up the most hilarious tales on the spot. That building over there is the post office. It's also the oldest concrete structure here in this part of town. It was originally designed to be the mayor's office, however. The third mayor opted to move the official office to a more central location. Then he turned to the other side of the street. That coffee shop. They have the best gingerbread in the world. You won't believe it, but the wolf who owns the shop actually has in his basement the gingerbreadman. He tricked him into jumping on his back to cross that river. He pointed to the river, then captured him. Since then, Archie's been serving the locals little cuts of the tiny guy. That was the worst one so far. Wait till I take you to the cottages near the forest. That's where a crazy wolf stalked his human mate. She loved wearing red coats. He winked. Just stop. I laughed. Over there is the Coney Island. It's mostly a dating grounds for teens. He continued to drive. That shop over there. It's one of my mum's places. She runs a chain of souvenir shops that sells novelty souvenirs for the tourists coming of the ferry cruises. This one is her main office, as it is closest to the harbor. Well, that's decent. I love those little trinkets. Can we go in and eat her? But mostly look at the merchandise were my true intentions. He looked at his watch, then hesitated for a second. Perhaps I was out of line asking this of him. She should still be in. I guess she would let mine staying open a bit longer. She supplied everything from snow globes with each of the town's landmarks within them, to keychains and bottle openers. Each item encompassed the rich culture of the town, both human and wolf. Had I been a tourist, he'd be a sucker spending away the last of my money. I actually got goosebumps when I saw the hand-carved wolf figurines. I could feel the energy put into each piece by the craftsman, each a tribute to the goddess herself, as they were all recreated in the images of her children. They were ominous, vibrantly painted, so true in colors. I could almost see a real wolf behind each carving. No two carvings were the same. From there was a black wolf that was carved on a hilltop, to a white carved to look as if howling at the moon. Each told a unique story. Choosing would have been impossible, had I not seen what looked like a red wolf on verge of attacking. Something about it just called to me. Those are my favorite. The clerk came up to me. Wolf was too young to be his mum. She didn't appear upset at humming and so close to closing time. But of course that could be because Blaze was the owner's son. They are beautiful. Who made them? Our local seniors carving club. All proceeds go back into the elderly home. She spoke with pride. All wolves honored the elderly. To reach such a tender age meant the goddess herself kept them in good health. The pact to pleasure in taking care of the ones who couldn't care for themselves. Hey Brittany, is my mum in the back? Blaze spoke to the clerk. She's in the stockroom. Go on in. I was a child in place filled with treasure, old and wide-eyed with excitement to explore each item, before deciding which I would be taking home. The smell of varnish reminded me of my own grandpa, who was a carpenter by trade. It took me back to the days when my sister and I would draw dollhouse furniture, to which grandpa would bring to life. He would spend hours with us, watching our favorite cartoons, so that he could replicate the dream house. At one point, he started building a child-sized playhouse for us. A great idea. Only we grew out of doll houses before he could complete the task. The unfinished playhouse remained untouched, under an oak tree in the backyard. I never collected snow globes before, perhaps due to my lack of traveling to anywhere. I'd seen them on the television before and I had always been fascinated. This storm made me want to build a fireplace with a large mantle to house each globe. Shaking the water around then, watching the glistener fall was mesmerizing. Or maybe I was easily amused. A large number of the globes had a cherry theme to them, I recalled seeing the endless fields of cherry trees when David drove me here. My guess at the time was the fruit was a major export. In my birth pack, grapes were where our farmers made their larger dollars. Aponicas of white vines surrounded the town. The harvest was always sold to an outside winery, leaving no kind of fame to the pack. Blaze had given me a book on the town's history, from which I confirmed my guess to be correct. The community lined their bank accounts from several long-standing businesses. Cherries and lumber were major exports, but the shipping company on the docks were just as lucrative. The pack used every marketable product of the land, including the land. There was a national park which also brought in revenue as tourists loved hiking the trails. The tourist industry was not only comparable, but it utilized the other trades to bring in customers. That is, some of the hotels offered cherry picking as an activity. On the way here, I was sure Blaze spoke of a processing plant where the cherries were preserved and canned. The profits all stayed within the pack. Hence the people were wealthy. Alfred Donovan and his sisters weren't visionaries. If it was broken, why fix it? Donovan, though he was the mayor, he didn't use his role to develop the community. He instead used the political lens to create rules to keep our pack safe. I guess safety to him was more valuable than financial growth. See anything you like? The clerk asked as she flipped the sign to closed. Seeing that action made me uncomfortable, like I was making her work extra. I hated that ting of guilt rising from my stomach. She must have sensed how I felt. Take as long as you need. It's really fine. She smiled as she insisted. I really like the globes. How do I decide which one I really want? A soliloquy response. Yes, that can be a tough choice. I recommend the harbor globe. It's the most accurate globe of the town, she said, putting the globe into my hand. She was right. It depicted an angle of the town that captured the cherry fields on the lumber yard. The glittered outs around the ball, displaying the magic for a brief moment, then it all settled, covering the words in sparkles. This was going to the first of many. Already I knew I had become a collector. You'll take it. This, and the red wolf figurine. They'll start boxing them. Take your time. Look around. She said, then went to the counter. Before I could walk across the room, Blaze was back, and he brought his mum out with him. A woman who had drunk from the fountain of youth. For there was no way Blaze was her son. She looked no older than 30. However, then I noticed the crow's feet at her eyes, which betrayed the rest of her body when she smiled. The most subtle sign of aging still framed her beauty. Mum, this is Luna. Luna, this is my mom. Charlotte, Blaze said nervously. I could already tell. He gave her the "don't embarrass me" speech before coming out. By the way he used his pointer finger, as if still warning her. It all looked so comical, because she was clearly absorbed completely in meeting me, and ignored him unequivocally. They both shared the same color eyes. That was as far as the resemblance went. Blaze must have inherited his looks from his dad. This gentle female was the opposite of the intimidating figure Blaze was. About time he let me meet you, she squealed before pulling me into an unexpected hug. With my hands unmoving and my breathing halted, I stayed in her arm until she let go. Blaze only rolled his eyes while the clerk held in a giggle high, was all I could say when she finally let go. You're so pretty too. She continued her perky behavior. Mom, that's enough. Blaze warned, to which she ignored. I wished my mum were more like her. She was completely elated to meet me, making me feel welcomed and somehow appreciated. Everyone I met so far in this pack had been welcoming, come to think about it. These strangers made me feel more at home in the last 4 months than my family did in the last few years. Are you two going out for dinner? Are you on your way to a date night? She kept asking question after question, not giving Blaze a chance to answer. It was quite comical to watch Blaze evade her rapid rounds of interrogations. She wanted to know if he was bringing me home to meet his dad officially. That made me slightly blush, but also uncomfortable. When a man met his mate, it was traditional for his family to host a celebration for her. The bitter whispering hummed. Jackson didn't even wait for me to accept his choice. His family celebrated Nilla, The very same night he rejected me. Did they have it all planned and waiting? To put together a feast in one night was a task. Unless you were prepared. They knew I would show to maturity. They probably had a bidding pool. Normally, I would stick my train of thought on the what-ifs, but the path detoured somewhere in my head to Blaze. Did he ever celebrate his mate? Did she reject him before he could? His silence over his past only expanded my curiosity. I created so many theories trying to understand what went wrong with them. Why would anyone not want this man? His personality thus far was nothing less than respectable and gentlemanly. His flaws were yet to be revealed, if any existed. His dominance only made me feel safe. He reminded me of that Jackson would put into showing Nilla he would always be there for her. Jackson would puff up his chest, peacock king if you may, in her company. He never had a reason to get physical because he always kept her on the safe side. If any wolf were around Nilla, Jackson would growl them off. Yet he never had a confrontation in his wild form. Thinking back, perhaps he orchestrated the few run-ins with his wolf buddies to impress her, make his tiny-minded human feel safer while giving himself bragging rights. Blaze didn't require a puffed up chest to display his brute potency, even in a formal suit. Blaze looked threatening. His handsome features didn't always look inviting. How about that Luna? When you're E-Ray off course. Charlotte brought me back to reality. I had no clue what she was talking about. And it showed. Blaze watched me, partially hiding his smile, and making me go red. His smile had that effect. Any sane female would flip over his smolder. "Oh, you're so cute." His mother cooed. "And she and I will discuss this more than get back to you. Can't you see how uncomfortable you're making her? Did you see anything you liked? We also have phone cases. Do you have a phone? Let me see it and I'll get you the right size." "Stop, Mom. You're not slipping your number into her phone," Blaze said, catching on to her game. "How clever. Brittany is boxing my purchase. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Despite being nervous, I enjoyed meeting Charlotte. Her energetic personality made her lovable. She was exactly what a mother should be like when trying to wingman her son. "I'll pay for them," Blaze offered. "Thank you." Him paying had me a bit uneasy. I wanted to protest, but felt it best not to offend him, especially in the presence of his mother. He had insisted on a condition in my contract that stated he would cover all my expenses. When I agreed to that condition, I didn't expect to be in his person. In my head, I assumed he meant submit my invoices and he would reimburse me. Or perhaps I just was used to men being nice around me. "You have some really nice things here." I almost cowed and decided which to get. I confessed. If time had permitted me, I would have been here a few hours longer. "We get some new items at the end of the week. Feel free to drop on in. I'm going to write my number on the receipt. Call me if you need anything." "I will." "Mum, we really need to get going. I don't want to be late for our reservations." "Of course." She turned to me. "It was an absolute pleasure meeting you, Luna. Don't be a stranger." "What reservation?" "Nothing about this night was planned." "Why do you lie to her?" I asked as I buckled myself into the car. "I'm not lying," he defended her. "I used Mum's office phone to call the restaurant. We are out already. Why not, if dinner are?" "I thought you were trying to get us out of there before she started asking questions." "That too." "What did you tell her about me?" I imagined she had tons of questions pertaining to the nature of our arrangement. I was brought here to be his arranged mate. But did she know that? A long span of silence went by before he spoke. I honestly thought he was going to answer. "I told her we are getting to know each other. I didn't tell her about your past. That isn't her business or mine to share." "That's lying." I know my accusation irked him, to the point he pulled the car into a parking lot, then looked at me. My heart almost froze as I inhaled him. His unspoken emotions. I could taste him on the tip of my tongue. He was so close to me physically. I never lied about anything. He held my hand firmly. As always, no sparks. His grip was firm but gentle, making me sweat in the palm of my hands. Was it wrong to feel attracted to him in this state? You're getting to know me. I know very little about you. You haven't shared anything with me, therefore. You lied. The lawyer in me made me see and gather facts. My lips became the focal point of his eyes. Thud, thud, thud. Something in my chest was trying to hammer its way out. Luna. The way he said my name sounded slurry. I wasn't sure if I was imaging things. But at this point his hold on my hand felt different. There was a tenderness to his touch, as if I was the only female he had ever lay hand on. At his age, a normal male wolf would have already settled with their mate. Having met his mate already, biologically, he would have been triggered to procreate. That animal instinct within us wolves would push him towards his mate. The flaws of the goddess's design. She didn't account on a mate leaving the other. You're right. He spoke again, releasing my hand from his. There's a lot about me I'm not ready to share. However, there's plenty to share without going down that rabbit hole. When we go inside, ask me anything. I'll answer what I can. He unbuckled his seatbelt and switched off the car. Wait. Are we at the restaurant? He didn't laugh very often, but when he did, the sound was magical. His real laughter was addictive. After days of being in his company, I learned to distinguish the feigning. I thought you just stopped in a random car park. I confessed. Let's go. When I got out of the car, he came to stand beside me, extending his elbow. In that split second, I was brought back to daydreams of Jackson taking me out in a similar manner. I would watch him do this very same gesture with Neela, as I pretended it was with me, no matter how much I told myself to forget. The memories prowled me. Are you okay? Blaze whispered as we entered the restaurant, in just feeling a bit underdressed. You're fine. You always look nice. Words I once wished my moon-given mate would have said to me. Until today, I had gone by so many days without thinking of him or even reading his pointless messages. More lies. The restaurant was filled to maximum capacity. Down to the bar was crowded with couples awaiting an available table. This place must be a popular one. Most of the tables were occupied by couples. Wolves. I could smell their rising affections as it saturated the air around me. This place is nice. Wait till you try the food. This was to date, but it remained my first dinner with a non-related male. In the back of my head, a small celebration was taking place. Without knowing, Blaze was giving me one of my first. I guess his ignorance was a blessing, as the nerves weren't there. Embarrassment would kill me if he knew I never experienced the normal part of my teenage years. Why the red wolf figurine? It's an odd choice. That's exactly why. It calls to me. I wish I knew who carved it. Red isn't a typical color for a wolf. He studied me as I spoke, as if hiding a precious but obvious secret. His face lit up. You like odd things. You're supposed to be answering the questions. His gaze kept focusing on my lips. I was almost tempted to ask if he liked my shade of lipstick. Imagining his response. Should I ask that? Made my pulse speed up. Without realizing, I started biting my lower lip. You look really pretty. And I began to blush. The waitress came over with the menu, then took our orders. The she-wolf smiled a bit too much, as if seeing Blaze was the highlight of her day. He, however, didn't show her any unnecessary attention. Was he used to women being excessively friendly with him? Was that the reason his mate left him? You ready with your questions? How did you get us a reservation at the last minute? I whispered to him. Some of the faces turned towards me, obviously hearing my question. I was expecting him to say he was the owner or related to them, or maybe he was one of the town's wealthiest. Rich people could make things happen at a snap of a finger. That's what you're going to waste your first question on. Did he think I intended to play 21 questions? I may be young, but I tried not to be klitsch. Getting to know someone was the game one should play. There's a line outside. I don't wait in lines. He casually browsed the wine menu. And why is that? He said boldly. I'd identity you the alpha. I tried to keep my voice to its lowest level. That means earlier today. Your mum is the former alpha female. Did I really blank her when she tried to get my number? I held my palms over my face. I was the girl who followed the rules and respected those in authority. How did I not figure this out sooner? His dominant aura, the respect everyone gives him. Heck, even his house seemed to be overlooking every angle of the pack. He didn't come to the center. Not because he was a rich snob, but because he had a pack to run, with or without his mate. To the back of him, a couple tried their best not to eavesdrop. The female held her wine to her lips, but didn't drink. Her breath stilled almost as much as mine. Like Charlotte, their fingers were crossed, hoped that their leader found a replacement mate. My eyes discreetly traveled around the room, and the faces to the tables closest to us all shared the same expression. She still gave you her number, and I wouldn't worry about that. His words distracted me from the audience around us. Great. Now I wouldn't settle until I called her. What kind of first impression did she get from me? Was it necessary to keep such a detail from me? I get you want privacy, but from experience, it didn't go so well. Then I remembered Nina telling me the first female ran off before meeting him. Did she learn of his title? Was she given a contract that consisted of his rank in the pack? If she came here thinking she was to be his arranged, I'd understand why she ran off. Not many could handle the burden that came with leadership. Your title doesn't intimidate me. Are you the mayor of this town? My alpha was the mayor. I wondered if he was the same. My title means nothing when we are together. You and I, we are equals. And no, I'm not the mayor. I own a legal firm, among other investment. Impressive, particularly the part where he called me his equal. Jackson made me feel less than for so long. To be called equal was mine soothing compliment. For the better part of my life, I felt guilty for being the shifting twin, as if it were my fault. I was born wolf. Being called an equal somehow triggered a form of internal freedom. The psychological consequences of being forced to live in the shadows of my sister was a mental prison that he'd been confined in for far too long. Thud, thud, thud. A warm feeling flowed through me. I knew my heart has always been beating, but the more time I spent in Blaze ES company, the clearer the heartbeats. So will I have a job after I pass the bar? At my firm, we only hire the brightest and top of the class graduates. I don't know if you decut it. I opened my mouth pretending to be hurt. Of course you have a job lined up with me. He finished with a playful smile. Oh my God, you can be my tutor if I need help. I thought you'd never ask. His playful words made me feel less tense. I would have asked sooner, but I had no idea what you did for a living until just now. I counted. Each time he smiled, I automatically followed. Now that I knew a little about him and didn't run off like the previous female, there was a new level of security to our relationship, and I would always remind myself, this was a business arrangement. Those smiles didn't mean anything, no matter how much he smiled. It's odd that you're not the mayor. I'm used to an alpha in a political standing. Being appointed the pack's leader was the plan. Not this early in my life, at least. My father ran for office, and when he won, I had to assume responsibility early. 25 years was rather young for him to be an alpha. Most that I knew of were men in their 30s. Unlike the past, being alpha wasn't necessarily a job for the strongest of wolves, though the strongest wolf more often still held the title. In today's modern world, the alpha was more of a political job. Keeping our kind safe from discovery by humans was the topmost role of the alpha couple, a task done by creating a network of allies throughout the country, from police officers, doctors, lawyers, to animal control. The alpha needed to hold ties with wolves in various positions worldwide. We never know the day we would need to convince the populace that a gas leak was the reason people hallucinated seeing wolves turning into humans, or erase DNA from a car crash. Which office? Governor. A post that would put other alphas beneath him. The Quintal family was leagues ahead in positioning themselves in areas of public authority. Do you intend to follow in his footsteps? As I asked, I began thinking about a life as the governor's wife. I already started the legal journey that would one day see me fit to stand beside him, not just be a housewife whose only job was to produce and raise kids. I was neither. At this point, I didn't even want kids. The possibility of having twins was all the birth control advice I'd ever need. I would never pass this curse to any innocent children. Of course, I remembered this was only a business relationship. My addiction to dreaming had emerged once again. I may run for office one day. The food arrived, making him cut short his answer. He would always go silent, would always go in our immediate company. Strangely, I like this quality about him. It showed he valued the privacy of our conversation, but more so, respected the staff enough to politely acknowledge their presence rather than act as if they were invisible. Should I start calling you Alpha? Looking at him, the world started moving in slow motion as he smiled at me. His dimples never went unnoticed by me. Why, out of all the puerile questions I ever asked, did he have such a reaction to this? Luna, you will never have to refer to me as your Alpha. We're friends. Are we not? I won't have my most needed friend bow down to me. I meant it when I say we are equals. His reply moved me. Am I free to move around the peg? I had no real reason to ask this. My mind was on autopilot again. Only this time it occurred because I was getting nervous. Handsome men of power had that effect on me. You were never my prisoner, you know this, right? The lack of chains and not being placed in a cell should have clued me in. I teased back. You've been free to move about since day one. However, I'm glad you chose not to. Those words made me blush. Whether he was flirting or not, he was clear to point this out. He was glad to be here with me, showing me around and having dinner with me. Glad could mean anything. Interpretation was endless. Glad as in he thought this was his duty as my employer, or even that he was here to ensure I didn't run off. I think you'll be going back to your mum's shop tomorrow. I started before he cut me off. She won't be there. She's at the Northwick Street branch on Fridays. He looked at me and I could see the gears turning. I can take you after lunch. Thud. 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 That sounds good. I uttered like an idiot. If he and I were humans, the term would be a date. However, we weren't. I couldn't find a label to call this little rendezvous. Of course, the possibility of me making this out to be more than it was highly probable. I was still an inexperienced, 19-year-old. I had to rely on my imagination for answers to the little things I observed. For instance, Blaze at first only met me in the late hours of the night. As time went by, he began knocking at my door, earlier and earlier. Today in particular, he arrived long before the working hours could have possibly ended. What else could I conclude but this was a result of him enjoying my company? A sharp pain radiated from within me. Jackson's words. I won't ever be yours, Luna. I love your sister. I think you're making my time with you out to be more than what it is. I pity you. I didn't want to be the fool again. Jackson's pity was edible. With force, I swallowed it all. However, I couldn't be on the receiving end of pity from Blaze. Sheer determination to not fall prey to Jackson's charm prevented me from checking his messages. In all those days of ignoring those emails, the temptation to have just one peek slowly deteriorated. I did battle myself. Some days the figments of my good and bad sides would come out with verbal pros and cons to reading his messages. Yes, your mate. The bad version of me would say, you should read his reasons. She would pester. The bad side still suffered from what I could only describe as Stockholm Syndrome. That version of me was still willing to stand by him, like a good little she-wolf, understanding why Jackson didn't want me, would offer her the credence she needed to stay at his side. She remained loyal to her mate, in spite of all that had occurred. Then there was the good version. Yes, your mate. You should read his reasons. She also would say, only she meant I needed to know that I may have closure to move on this side of me didn't have the same predilections as my bad. I already knew his reason. He loves her. He picked the life that made him happier. and as if the goddess herself touched my thoughts, the epiphany hit me. He loves her. It's why he moved on, therefore should also be my reason to move on. The whispers in my head weren't torments. They were words of encouragement from the broken parts of me. The battered and broken voice wasn't haunting me. She was there supporting my choices at each of my low points. She only sought to remind me why I was doing what I was doing. It wasn't fear of facing my family or letting go of Jackson that made me unable to confront them. Fear did accentuate me. But was the driving force behind me, or was it hatred? What put me here was my own will to restart my life in my own terms. The life I wanted didn't include pity. I was the other twin here. I was Luna. When was the last time you shifted? His face was now serious. Admitting I never left the house should have clued him in. There was no real harm in staying within my human skin. Many wolves who lived in the cities avoid shifting for prolonged periods of time. I did shift from time to time in front of my mirror, to note the change in my size and groom my fur. However, he wasn't asking about just shifting. He meant running in the open fields, letting the beast side of me have freedom to howl at the star-filled skies after stomping my paws through the forest. Shifting for me was unnecessary because I no longer had a mate. Nature didn't demand I shift, as I no longer had a soulmate out there listening for the calls of my heart. No one to return the echoes of my heartbeat. A werewolf who didn't shift was nothing more than a human, albeit a stronger than the average human. I could love like a human, date like a human, have sex with whomever I wanted. Now that there was a goddess-given male who I should save myself for, I don't explore anymore. I felt some shame saying this. Did I really lose this much of myself because of a man? A man who didn't want me, because he would sense you. He took my hand into his. I don't think he would be able to pinpoint your location from this far, not unless HES in the area. My lands are private. Even if HES close, I won't grant him entry for his paws. I have forgotten that part of the law. The human skin was free to move about in the human world, but no wolf was allowed to shift in another alpha's territory without his permission. I was safe here, at least from Jackson in his wolf form. He'll keep you safe. He gave me his word, a promise that held more weight. Now that I knew he was the alpha male, his hands were so large compared to mine, but the way he folded in his fingers made us fit together as if we were made to be holding each other. I suppose all hands did this. I didn't need to compare him to my rejector. The man who betrayed me never once held my hand with such care. What I felt was unfamiliar but welcomed. Flutters, not sparks, however just as overpowering. His touch for the first time made me tingle with goosebumps. When you're ready, I'll go with you, he offered, adding another thick layer of comfort to me. Did he already go through this? His mate was miles away, which meant he knew from experience. How else would he know Jackson wouldn't be able to sense my location? Do you still sense her? Your mate? I mean when you shift. I almost stuttered on my sentence, because at the last second, I tried to hold my tongue. Truly this was my business. I did it first. I knew when she was on pause. The times when she was close by, of course. Then she started seeing dust and the ability to feel her gradually faded until it stopped altogether. The sadness in his eyes was all I could see as he spoke. He loved and wanted his mate. How could she move on? Why did the goddess curse us? I don't even remember the last time I sensed Jackson. Before I turned 18 for certain, but the exact date I don't remember. Somehow this realization made me happy. I let go without knowing. A long time ago. If I couldn't sense him, then he couldn't sense me. Do you still care for him? I was tired of this question, whether he was the one asking or my reflection. The answer remained the same. Not here you go. And I should have been puzzled. I was for a few seconds, in fact. Neither Jackson nor I had any feelings towards each other, for that alone meant our soul bond was broken. I was free from hearing the calls, the same soul calls that had gone mute without notice. In actually being that silly girl, I was hiding without reason. The last of J. Axon's messages all begged for my return while lost sake. My mate didn't want nor did he need me. Mate my nephew. Was for his benefit. How's your steak? He changed the subject. He did this often. Moved the topic away from what he must have thought were my demons. Kind and caring, I craved to have him, or someone like him as my own. It's so good. But cheesed stuffed vegetables, not so much. His laughter was loud this time. Don't let my mum hear you. This is one of her restaurants. I knew it. You got us a table at the family-owned business. Alfred doesn't wait my ass. I teased with their quotes. The flutters in my stomach grew as he looked at me. Eyes that felt pity for the rejected female. Had been what I was accustomed to. But in his luring gaze, I felt like the best version of myself. If ever he was giving me a reason to fall for him, it was the fun of the look he gave me. What? I took my napkin to my mouth as I spoke, hoping to deflect him from seeing the blush set in. How do you feel about meeting the rest of my family? How much family are we talking about? My parents, grandparents, my sister, my son. I almost choked on my drink. As in a child his mate gave birth to and still left. The dynamics of his past was indeed a convoluted story. Every fibre of my being turned into a sponge waiting to absorb the details. A real past filled with what must be a tragic romance waited for me, possibly a most pain-filled tale of star-crossed lovers. Only Blaze was ready to share. He dared not remove the bandage without his absolute certainty of the wound's closure. Was I supposed to get angry that he kept this detail from me? Or was I to respect him more as a man who didn't just allow any woman into his son's life? The latter was more admirable. If only my father didn't allow Jackson into my life after knowing who he was. Once again, Blaze won the battle of being a better individual. Your son. Now I had the image of a tiny Blaze in my head. I have a son. A GS3. His name is Brendan. On his forehead was a bead of sweat that kept getting larger and larger. The color of his skin got paler as if he was cold sweating from this admission. Now he and I both knew the reason I came to his pack was because of Nolan. What he didn't know, my reason was not because I hated the kid, but because the child was also the son of my twin. His existence was a slap to my face, considering he literally was the splitting image of what a child with my mate would look like, had I been the mother. I didn't hate my nephew, not one bit. Sadly, he would always be a reminder. I was mateless. For him to be alive, I had to surrender all claims to my mate. His life was paid for in my misery. I shouldn't have to love that misery, and I deserved to choose whether or not I wanted to meet him. I was a female who resented children. Now my mind was busy rewinding all the conversations that occurred between Blaze and myself, trying to determine if I ever suggested I didn't want children. I know I didn't want any of my own, but adoption was never out of the question. Am I allowed to meet him? Please say yes. I expected him to say no. Based on my lack of interest in meeting Nolan, his constant concern in my feelings towards Nolan how clicked. Whether he wanted me to meet my nephew so that I may completely be freed of Jackson, or so that he could judge my ability to accept a child who wasn't mine, was now up for my demons to debate. You're not going to ask about the backstory. He took out his handkerchief, then began to wipe his forehead. No, I actually understand where you're coming from. If I had a kid, it'd be cautious of whom I introduced to him. I understand. This is a business arrangement. I don't think you introduce all your employees to him. Why should I be any different? You're different, and you're more than just an employee. I want to believe one day that there'll be more between us. He corrected me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Between us, a new tune of hope was born, feeding my starved heart. We just aren't there yet. I finished for him. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm not ready to talk, but it feels assuring that I'm not alone. I understood clearly. Would you like to tell me about him? How could I be living in the same building as the child for all these months and not noticed? My housing unit was perhaps on the opposite end of his. What kind of person doesn't look out the windows? Did I really shy away that much? As much as I love talking about my boy. Tonight isn't for that. I have no experience with children. I don't think I remember how to play with one. Another soliloquy. You're young. You learn. Brendan is quite easy to get along with. The fire I always saw now had a name. Brendan. His son was the unseen force driving him to push forward towards recovery. He didn't allow his mate to cripple him. Because he had Brendan. A reason to accept the loss of a soulmate. Because he still had a piece of her. Why would his mate abandon him with their child? Not all females were cut out to be parents. Thankfully, from all the reading I did, I could recall there was the real but outdated law dictating an alpha must secure an heir. Did she abandon them because she didn't want to be an alpha female? Unlike the past where an alpha female was practically a queen. Today, an alpha female was similar to being a public servant. The job was taxing, more than it was luxurious, particularly in this large pack. In my birth pack, the females still lived in the past. They were housewives living in a rural town. Luna Hestia didn't have a real job, other than being the mayor's wife. Alpha Donovan's pack consisted of perhaps 100 to 250 members including children. In his entire district, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The alpha couple were responsible for an entire state filled with wolves. Did the pressure of her intended role get to her? She could not accept what is yet to have meant the life of being an alpha female. Did his mate abandon him with their child because she was unable to accept the life he was born into? I hated her. When did you plan on introducing me? There was so much packed into this question. Did he approve of me to be around his kid? Was I going to be permanent in his life, and who would he introduce me as? Obviously, he was ready now, but knowing the timeline that helped me gauge the dynamics between us, by allowing me to see where he thought we stood. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Between us, you really weren't listening to Mom, weren't you? He asked, and my face flushed. Guilty as charged. This night fell in the grey area between disaster and total embarrassment. There was nothing I could say to defend myself. Mum wants us to come over for Thanksgiving, so the rest of the family can meet you. We said we'll talk about it. Yeah, I remember. I didn't. Will I meet Brendan then? It was months away, I worried. I'll be sure to introduce you well before then. The last thing you need is everyone in your face with question, including a toddler. All at once. Will he like me? Nervously. His dad likes you. I couldn't look at him. Not while my face was red. All the feelings that were growing within me for the last few months had also been brewing within him. As always, my mouth filled with the flavor of my soul while my canines extended, hoping to lay claim to the male before me. One bite and he would be mine. The couple to the table behind him didn't try to hide their reaction. The female held her chest and I could read her lips say, this was their alpha moving on from the wretched she-wolf who abandoned him and their child. A second chance at happiness, and an opportunity for me to have a family. With Brendan in the picture, I'd never need to birth a child. I could live guilt-free now that I wouldn't have to risk passing the twin gene to innocent children. A blessing from the goddess. 9 guilt. Little hands held me tight while he entered the world of dreams, all tuckered out from spending the entire day with me. Brendan lightly snored in the comforts of my arms. He fell asleep not even halfway into the story, but I still finished the book, reading each page, pretending this child was my own. Guilt for loving this boy bled me. Shame brought tears that only fell when I spent time with a child I loved as if I bore him from my body. I recall the day I met little Brendan for the first. His dad brought him to my quarters 2 days after I learned about his existence. Little did Blaze know, he was teaching the child how to reach me from the connecting doors. For less than a week later, Brendan would be making the trip on his own. Enthusiasm, into my living room. A series of toys awaited the child's arrival, all against Blaze's wishes. Of course I was willing to stoop to bribery. If only I knew then, I wouldn't need to. Brendan, this is my special friend Luna, he introduced, Luna. Meet the next alpha. Hi Brendan. Hello Liz. He mispronounced my name, but stole my heart. My toys. His excited little face turned to a large selection of toys and coloring material I prepared. I got them for us, that we can play as we get to know each other. The words went over his head in the most adorable way. My toys? He asked again. I was all smiles as was Blaze. Yeah, buddy. Those are for you. Blaze spoke as Brendan ran off towards a Hatchimal toy egg. I was thinking we could go for pizza, but now it looks like we'll be spending the evening here. I'll order in. Blaze commented, looking at his son tear open the toy packaging. No, let's bake our own pizza here. I raised my right hand. I have frozen dough that I made last week. It's no trouble at all, and I promise it will be fun. If I get to choose my own toppings, then why not? His smile was usually all it took to send me to Lotta Land. However, with a tiny cuter version here with him today, his good looks failed to charm me. All my attention was absorbed by Brendan, who was now putting me down to the ground right. He held a jumbo crayon up. In true clueless fashion, I took the pink crayon and mimicked his actions. Pink. This is my favorite color, I said back to him. I cred. His way of talking was too adorable. Daddy likes purple. Blaze spoke but held the violet crayon. I guess he didn't know there was a difference. You boys want to color? My voice sounded painstakingly like my grandmother's did when my sister and I visited her. Yes, please. I love coloring. Blaze kissed his son's cheek. A rogue thought, as always, would threaten to ruin the moment. Did Jackson and Miller do this with their boy? By now Olin would be in his 8th month of life. Maybe still too young for these activities, but no doubt they would be other forms of play. A life that should have been mine was always in my head. The voice reminded me that Jackson loved who he loved and had moved on. The softness of his voice really showed how much he loved his son. No matter how many questions the little guy asked, Blaze met each one with patience. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Understanding the toddler was difficult. His baby language was not easy for me to decipher, unlike Blaze, who understood each word. Your coloring page is the best ever. I praised him when he was done. Just like me, the child blushed whenever he was given a compliment. I colored this one for you. Blaze presented me with his work. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Not from a printed coloring page, but this he drew on blank paper. The petals were pink, and around it was a purple heart. In the corner of the page, a few scribbles of what might also be an attempt at drawing a flower had been where Brendan invaded. Perfection was all I thought. It's beautiful. Thank you. Kerhabajuba. Brendan spoke and I was lost again. I swear, those were the words I heard. He wants a juice box. Blaze quickly translated. I cheer so adorable when he speaks. I said as I went to the refrigerator. Thank goodness I used my foresight to stock it with snackses. How about we get started on lunch? I suggested as I handed Brendan the juice box. That sounds like a great idea. Blaze agreed. N-E-N Paysign. I swear this was the cutest yet most confusing thing ever. Yes, then well play with slime. How did he understand that one? I wondered. What's your favorite topping, Brendan? He likes cheese, bacon, and tomato. His dad answered. And what does his dad like? I already told you. His dad likes you. He flirted and I was gone. My body remained in that room, but the inner entity floated up to the sky. Yes, this was moving fast. But yes, this was moving fast. Q2. Brendan held onto my hand. I hadn't noticed it then, but this was the precise moment in time where Brendan developed jealousy. He didn't give his dad a second with me, without intruding. For the rest of the evening, Brendan kept trying to gain my undivided attention. He would even pull my face toward his to avoid me from speaking to his dad. Let's get these topping on, shall we? I didn't miss the way he looked at me. I knew my way around the kitchen. I took full advantage of the multiple cooking courses taught at the center. At the time, it was just an activity to get me past the days. Today, I look back with a thankful mind at the place I found refuge in. During the lowest time of my life, here I was using the skills I learnt from said center, in that lowest sink age of my life, to build a future with these two guys. Again, I was a believer in the goddess and the path to happiness she promised all her subjects. Brendan sat on the counter, while we all decorated the pizza tops. As his father said, he liked bacon and every topping I had available. This was like a game to him, and the more he was allowed the ed, the higher his score. He was determined to win this made-up game, as each time Blaze would add a tomato slice or shred of cheese, Brendan would add twice as much to his mini pizza. What turned my insides to jelly, there was only one slice of pepperoni left, which Blaze and I both went for at the same time. To my complete shock, Brendan reached into his dad's hand to retrieve the meat cutlet and presented it to me after babbling what sounded like a warning to his dad. Why didn't I understand his language yet? Blaze rose his hands in surrender and allowed his son to do this, his chest puffed up with pride to that end. Watching his son stand up to him, I was beyond flattered. Then when the pizzas were out of the oven, Blaze tried to take a slice from mine. Bad move, as his son once again stood up to him. No list stars easy, he shouted at his father. Blaze was humoured by this all. He tried in vain to keep a straight face, but the cuteness was too much to not smile in awe. Again, I didn't know what he was saying, but guessing was hard. Daddy's been bad. Das list star B's ear. He supposed to ask. Brendan spoke again with a growl in his voice this time. I realized the more time I spent with him, the clearer the words were becoming. My mind was adapting to him, which made me feel a sense of accomplishment. I could feel little waves of dominance as waking up from within the child's aura as he unknowingly begun to establish ascendancy. You're right. Naughty Blaze. You were supposed to ask first. I scolded. In return, I was given a smile. You're right. Can I have a slice of yours, Luna? Brendan, before I could answer, brought a slice from his to my plate. He then settled on my lap to continue eating his lunch. Sure, we can all share, I answered. This was going better than I could have ever hoped. Approval from his son meant more to me than I was letting on, though it wasn't said. The contract had little or no meaning, as I was certain this male would one day be mine, would become our son, a second chance to find what was taken from us. And the best part was we were in control of this choice, a knot formed in the pits of my stomach. The risk of forming a poorly matching pairing didn't bother my Uncle Brian when he signed me into that center. Companionship didn't mean love. Had I been a weaker-minded female, the chance of me being marked by some random male at the center, after or during a state of being under the influence of cheap beer, would have been my tragic fate. The first couple I witnessed pairing off had been during the first somber night at the center. The female's name I don't remember, but her face was an image I'd never forget. She had smudged mascara around her brown eyes, making her look like she had just run out of a funeral. The male, his name was Wesley, was not of mate material. All my memories of him involved kept calling him vulgar slurs about how great he could make me feel, if given the chance. Their fates were sealed when they got too drunk to stop themselves from thinking out the consequences. They stayed at the center for 3 days after the marking, then left. I observed them. Their personalities clashed. There was no tenderness or affection between them, only comfort that they didn't have to be alone. They'll be fine, maybe even come to love each other one day, Tammy said as I watched them leave. Would that have been my life one day had I not come here? Thank the goddess I was blind during my stay there. Are you all right? Has this little man tired you at already? Blaze brought me back to the present. The grease from the pizza made his lips shine, as if he was wearing glass. They look so kissable. I table even. I was 19 and never had my first kiss. No, I'm fine, I replied, turning my face from his, risking him seeing how flushed my face was to inappropriate right now when his son was here. I cowed and didn't think the racy thoughts growing in my mind. Nor could I fight the crazy part of me that couldn't help herself by thinking this was cheating on my moon-given mate. The right thing to do would be to inform him, as he had informed me of his interest in my sister. Too bad I didn't care about being right anymore. You look paced out. Blaze spoke. Brendan was now running around with a bubble gun in his hands. The bubbles engulfed the kitchen and most of my living room. I started speaking, but Blaze moved out of my range to grab his son. You can't play with this inside, son. You know this. He scolded the child. The spots where the bubbles landed left a wet circle after they popped. The smell of the soap solution wasn't bad, but it did make breathing hard for me. I didn't mind the mess. Not one bit. However, I could see this rule wasn't limited to my space, but generally playing with bubbles in the house. So WIE. Sad eyes rose to watch me. It was apparent how fond he was of the toy, and I just couldn't see his sad face after being told to stop. How about we go to the park? I'm sure the bubbles would be just as fun there. Pleased, Daddy. The tears were still on his eyelashes and he pouted his lips. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Let's go get your coat. Can we taste some too? Brendan grabbed onto a jar of slime. No, baby boy. No slime in the car. Blaze denied him. Glim, you ready? No other time during my life was I this ready. My introduction could not have gone any better, as if I were a part of their family. The guilt didn't build up onto my heart where it began to bleed me until later on. The park came with spectators, which didn't bother neither Brendan nor his dad. I, however, couldn't settle with all the eyes that failed to shy from us. Some were friendly while others discourteous. Why are they all looking at me? I asked as we walked back to the car. Blaze held a now sleeping Brendan in his arms while I held the toys. We weren't touching, but he did walk close to me, like a mate would with his family. You being here before Jade is officially married off. Offense, son, he replied. Not what I was expecting to hear. As far as I knew, she left him. My mind had created so many stories to fill in the gaps as I really didn't know any of the details of why she left. She was the evil one. Only because Blaze was so good to me. A man this good couldn't be at fault. She chose someone else, didn't she? I kept my voice low as we got into the car. I didn't want to wake Brendan, now that he was snuggled safely into the car seat. He looked like such a little angel in his slumber. Why would his mother leave him? She has made it abundantly clear to me, the pack and all concerned. She chose Dustin. I felt it in each of his words. This, too, was once my pain. A mate who chose another. Again, the reasons for her leaving her son became all I could focus on. Did you reject Brendan? Though there was no blood. I bled internally to ask this yes. He breathed out, gripping the steer in more tightly. Was the last thing I said on the matter. The drive was a quiet one. We still managed to talk a little. He drove with one hand while holding my hand with the other. I noticed how much slower he drove with Brendan in the car, which only confirmed how great of a father he was. I think he likes you. I like him a lot too. I lied, I already loved the child. Maybe it was clinical, that the emptiness within me made loving this boy easy. I wanted to have a family of my own after all. I wanted to be loved. This arrangement offered me all that I craved. So was I allowing myself to fall into fast? Could he see how much more I wanted to be his, now that Brendan came as part of the package? Yes, I can see that. He took my hands to his lips and kissed it. Thud, thud, thud. My veins were out of control. My hands started shaking and my canines sharpened. At the house, he took his son inside while I went to my living area. I wanted to dance, sing and scream as I entered. Blaze returned not long after, come through our connecting door to offer to help clean up. I had already repacked the toys and cleaned the kitchen because I was incapable of sitting still. His brief touch of affection had filled me with so much adrenaline. How do you feel about my son? He asked while making himself comfortable on the sofa. I knew this was a conversation we would be having soon, but not on the same day I met him. He couldn't risk having any assumptions between us where his son was concerned. Any parent would be well within their rights to screen the company they intended to have around their child. She is a great kid. Fun, smart. I really like him. He is my heir, the next alpha of this pack. What an odd but obvious thing to say to me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I was puzzled at the reason he was telling me this. You won't think of him less because he is another female's child. I started to understand what was happening. He was insecure about how I felt. Now that his child had met me, if I wanted out, I had to do so now. I think you should know something. I took a deep breath because I was about to reveal something that may put this relationship to an end. I don't intend to have children. Brendan is a blessing, and if you and I get married one day, he'll be the only son I ever have. I wasn't allowed to finish. His lips were on mine and I was in heaven. His lips didn't shake like mine did, and I'm sure he would have now realized this was my first kiss. He made it all so perfect. The way his hands held the back of my head, then the way his forehead rested on mine when the kiss was over. I bit my lip and could taste his venom invading my tongue. His eyes moved from my eyes, then his hand caressed my face. His tender touch personified so much emotion to which my words could never express. No one told me my first kiss would leave me in a daze. Neither did they say I would feel needy for another and another. I wanted him. Do you mean that? He questioned. I was brain dead. Didn't remember what I was saying, but knew if I said it, I meant it. I nodded because opening my mouth would only let the taste dry up. Ambrosia was meant to be savored, not allowed to dissipate into the atmosphere via speaking. I was being greedy, trying to preserve his taste in my mouth. I'd consider my son yours. I'd consider him ours again. His lips were on mine. This time it lasted a bit longer, a bit more aggressive and overflowing with all the passion he had bottled up for me. I felt like I was desert finally experiencing rain, but not a drizzle. He browed with him, a hurricane, making every part of me wet. A new level of sexual tension. I was experiencing desire for him. I knew from within me that I never experienced before. Was hijacking me symptoms of pre-hate. You don't know how many times I wanted to do that. His voice was husky. What happened to keeping this professional? Of all the dumb things I could say, this moment was a dream. A fantasy I once made up to get past my days. That was now coming to life. This is exclusive. I just need to hear you say it. A plea from the tormented and broken part of his soul. I was willing to write it in words. Promise him I was all in, committed to exploring where this would take us. Not that I didn't know already, but I was brought here for this exact purpose. To one day be his. Absolutely. I wanted to end my words with more kissing, but I didn't know the rules to being a couple as yet. Was it okay for me to initiate kissing? Was this going to be like the relationship he'd seen on the television? Tell me, as if he could read my thoughts. This is all new to me. I blushed. You're so cute when you blush, he commented. I have to go. Get back before Brendan thinks I've gone missing. You could come over if you want to. Not that I didn't want to go back to his side of the house and kiss him until my lips were swollen, but I needed to do some research on this boyfriend-girlfriend thing. I would need to address the pink elephant that he was polite enough to ignore. The heat symptoms. A doctor's appointment for contraceptives was top priority. Now that I was his girlfriend, I really need to study for a test on Monday. I couldn't though. For the rest of the day then into the night, my brain kept rewinding the kiss. The smile on my face made my cheeks hurt, but still I kept smiling. The next morning, I had breakfast with the Quintal boys. Blaze was at my door as soon as the morning light illuminated the skies. Come have breakfast with us, he said after greeting me with my new favorite thing. Is Brendan up already? I asked because he said us. Archie has been bouncing around the house since 5. All he has been asking for is when will he be seeing you? I was flattered. All the questions I should have been asking were pushed to the back of my head. At a table, Nina had already prepared breakfast but was still pouring the coffee. Brendan was there with an iPad watching a cartoon. A smile came to my face upon seeing him. "Morning, everyone," I said at the speed he reached me. Giving me a hug was lighting fast. "Esther." He giggled my name. Instinctively I started to tickle him after taking him in for a hug. All kids liked being tickled. His laughter filled the room and I only stopped with flashing light come from Blazy's phone. He took a picture. "Lester, sit with me," Brendan spoke. "Sit with me." I understood what he meant, which gave me a deep-seated feeling of accomplishment. "I'd love to sit with you. What are you watching?" "Paw Patrol." He pointed the screen. "Okay, buddy." No iPad at the table. Blaze said, and both Brendan and I pouted it. His order was final. "We'll watch as soon as he goes off to work." I whispered into Brendan's ear. All was going well. The past almost didn't matter anymore, because this future was so bright and promising. The best of it all, I was taking another she-wolf's mate. The technicality behind the situation made this male mine for the taking, as long as Jade continued to refuse him. Why did it matter? What occurred to make Jade leave? She was gone, and now I had this opportunity to make a life with the family she left behind. I hated her, but was also thankful that she was the bitch she was. I wasn't nearly in this situation. Playing with Brendan was easy. Even during my online class, when he found his way into my living room, he sat quietly on my lap for the entire lecture, playing a game on his iPad. The class did halt for a short intermission when the lecturer noticed the cute boy on my lap, and she needed to acknowledge how cute he was. But that didn't bother me. I was happy to have him with me. I pushed Nolan to the back of my mind. "My nephew didn't deserve my love. I struck gold with you," Blaze said one evening when he found his son and I making cookies together. Brendan just looked at him, not understanding what he meant, but I did know. He hugged his son, then came towards me. In his work attire, he was the sexiest man alive. A sweet girl. He greeted me with a kiss. I could never get enough. He had started coming directly from work to my quarters at some point. Not before Brendan made it his routine to be in my living room each day at some point. I started leaving the adjoining door not just unlocked, but open so he could just walk in. He was still too short to reach the door, cane up hay. His touch would always remind me I was a female about to experience her first heat this heat season. Warmth would just spread all over me, and my nipples were always hard enough to cut glass in his presence. Now that I had tasted his venom from his kisses, my body began preparing itself to be his, to submit to him and allow him to mark my flesh as his. "Cookies again, huh?" He smiled at us. It didn't matter what Brendan asked me to make for us. I would say yes, even if it's cookies for a third time in 1 week. I was genuinely happy to spend time with him. The guilt continued to burn at me. "Chocolate chip and peanut butter." Brendan spoke in his baby language, but I was now understanding his words clearly. "Oh, a new flavor. Yummy." He was very encouraging. Nothing could go wrong, except I was still my own worst enemy. About a month later, I was ready to admit I was only hurting myself. Brendan had become a poignant reminder of what a heartless person I really was. My own nephew was almost a year. I still had not met him. Here I was, tucking in Brendan into bed some night, spoiling him with my love and showing him with gifts while I was denying Nolan an introduction. Months spent with Brendan while Nolan was ignored. "Tell me a story," Brendan requested as he yawned. "I'd love to." "Did you choose a book?" He shook his head, while handing me a dinosaur book. I knew before he chose it which he would pick, because in my heart, this child was mine, that the same heart was hemorrhaging for a nephew. It was complicated, because meeting Nolan meant facing the past. Why was this so hard on me? Little hands held me tight while he entered the world of dreams, all tuckered out from spending the entire day with me. Brendan lightly snored in the comforts of my arms. He fell asleep not even halfway into the story, but I still finished the book, reading each page, pretending this child was my own. Guilt for loving this boy bled me. Shame brought tears that only fell when I spent time with a child I loved, as if I bore him from my body. With tears in my eyes, I opened my old email account. I thought I was capable of forgetting them all, so I set up new accounts meant to cut off the past. It had been months since I read any of the hundreds of messages in there. Jackson's rants all felt meaningless now. The zeal I once had when reading his messages was gone. His words weren't sincere to me. His so-called mate. Nothing about him was mine, and now that I had broken out of the mental prison he confined me to, I was free to cut him off. Don't. The final dying thread that tied me to Jackson cried before fading into nothingness.